Hi, everybody. Welcome to the LifeSpa podcast. I'm Dr. John Douillard, your host, and today we have a really special guest, and we're going to dive deep into herbal medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, Western medicine, and really the state of affairs in herbal medicine today here in the States and also globally. His name is Roy Upton. He's the president and editor of the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, which is really kind of the critically acclaimed, most respected delivery of what are called monographs for each individual herb, whether it be Western or Ayurvedic or Chinese medicine. His work is respected around the world. He's been doing this for over 40 years. He's on the board of many national and international herbal associations, as well as herbal journals. You can't find anybody who is more qualified to talk about herbal medicine than Roy Upton. He's also a very dear friend of mine, and I'm super, super excited to have him on. Roy, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thank you, John. Nice to see you.
Yeah. So your work in herbal medicine, is way beyond, Chinese, Ayurvedic, and Western. It's really global. And I know you're doing a lot of work globally on herbal medicine. Can you give us a kind of an update on what's happening politically here in the States and around the world with herbal medicine?
Yeah, if there was a bottom line, for me, the international part of it started, I was an advisor for the World Health Organization's traditional medicine unit. For those who don't know it, everybody knows WHO, and you may like or not like them politically as a medical organization, but within the WHO, there's a traditional medicine unit, and it's been there for 40, 50 years. Their whole purpose is to promote traditional and integrative medicine into primary health care. Now, before, their focus was how do we provide adequate health care to populations that don't have access to Western medical care? For example, like in rural Colombia or rural Mexico, rural Africa, things like that. And so that was a big part of their initiative. And herbal medicine was always a big part of their initiative as well. And so I was an advisor to their first global summit, which was held in August of 2023. John, I went there with this idea of wanting to download all the things that you and I maybe feel and believe should be being done in human healthcare, not just human healthcare, but planetary healthcare. From the opening session, the people that made their inaugural presentations, and it represented indigenous people speaking with an indigenous voice, European-centric medicinal plant researchers and integrative medicine people, a broad spectrum of people. From that inaugural session, I realized that everything that was in my mind and in my heart for individual, social, global, and human healthcare, they were already doing in spades. They were already every part of the conversation, from, like I said, individual to global health to planetary health, and the relationship between that, they were already doing, and many countries were already attempting to implement their policies within their national healthcare system. So I came back completely stoked, re-energized of what am I going to do the last 10 to 15 productive years of my life. We're getting old, we're dying, we're retiring, we're getting Alzheimer's, we're stroking out. How do we take this time, this precious time we have left, and break out of our silos and try to work together to advance natural medicine for the benefit of, just human health and planetary health in general? So that was the genesis of it. So I came back and, with this renewed excitement, both for the work I do for American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, but also what can we do nationally and what can we do globally. So that was the genesis of it.
Well, didn't you tell me that when you were there, you were super excited about what was happening in the EU, but when you came back here, None of that was happening here in the States, that it was sort of like we are just so far behind in integrating natural medicine into Western medicine.
Yeah, very much so. I did. I came back very excited and also with renewed excitement and renewed anger and disappointment at the fact that there were only about six of us from the US at this summit. And most of the people that were there from other countries, John, they're the health minister of the country. They're the deputy health minister of the country. The wife of the president of Turkey, made a presentation. Nobel Prize laureate, Tu, who discovered artemisinin as an anti-malarial drug. She, gave a presentation. It was it was just such a high level conference, and all of us who were there physically were private organizations. And there was only one 5-minute Zoom presentation by a gentleman from FDA. Good guy. I know him, actually published a paper with him, but at the same time, it was just very little representation. Um, so yeah, so very much so. It was a mix of feelings.
So, we all know that in the US, there's a massive movement towards, natural medicine, Chinese medicine, hopefully soon Ayurvedic medicine, uh, that people are beginning to understand that and not trust their medical doctors and their medical doctor opinion. You go online, everybody gets told they're deficient in a statin, and of course the doctors are all giving them statins, and you go online and you get like completely confused because everybody online is telling you don't take a statin, don't take a statin. It's the most confusing system of healthcare probably on the planet. But the internet, the information age has definitely brought, the population on board with, hopefully a more truthful reality in terms of how we can become healthy. Do you think that movement, I mean, it's pretty massive. Maybe it's not as massive as I think, but I just wonder from your perspective, is that movement, the population kind of demanding it, having a dent on that, or are we just kind of still paying to play in the herbal medicine world?
I think the latter for the most part. Now, I will acknowledge that globally, you're totally right. That globally there's a massive movement and increase of interest in all things about traditional medicine. Um, it actually in the early 1900s, both Japan and China actually outlawed traditional Chinese medicine and traditional herbal medicine in their countries in exchange for what then was the German system of medicine, which is actually what our system of medicine is based on an early German system, which was a research-based system of medicine, not a patient-based system of medicine. But within 10 years, they recognized that the drugs that were introduced from Western medicine were not working for them, for the chronic diseases or the uh, general daily health issues that they were dealing with, and that they were so filled with side effects that they demanded that they go back to having access to Chinese medicine. And this happened both in China and in Japan, totally separately. They recognized it. Worldwide, now there's a recognition of the limitation, and this was one of the major points of WHO. What they said was, in the past, WHO has focused on communicable and infectious diseases and overt starvation. That was what was driving disease. Now, 85, what they said was 85%, and depending on what literature you look at, 76 to 85% of all diseases that we have now are behavioral. They're because of diet, lifestyle, stress, or environmental pollutants, contaminants. They're not about overt starvation. It's not about infectious diseases, pandemics aside. It's about now our behavior. And they recognize, one, there is no drug for behavior. Two, these are wellness based. You need wellness based solutions. There is no drug for wellness. As far as Western approved drug for wellness, any category, maybe except for Viagra, right? I mean, that could be considered a wellness metric, but generally speaking, they recognize that Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, naturopathy, that all of these systems inherently have behavior as a cornerstone of the medicine. And they also recognize that the herbal medicines are generally safer than the conventional medicines. They also recognize to a lesser degree that the philosophical constructs of traditional medical systems are different than Western medical constructs. And so all of this brings value to public health and global health. So that's a big driver. So now in the US, despite depending on how we parse the information, so you got like 76 to 82% of Americans using some type of alternative medicine. But what they do is but that's talking chiropractor, massage, yoga, a daily supplement, right? So it's not what you and I would consider to be deep commitment to natural medicine. It still goes back to what you said, a pay to play thing, because as long as these things aren't reimbursed under the national our healthcare system or insurance systems, they're not going for it. I mean, here's the latest thing was so Medicare, a federal program, approves of acupuncture
Right.
as a indication of a treatment for lower back pain, for example. But only physicians, medical doctors can do it. So how does that work when you have 52 jurisdictions in the United States? So the United States, Puerto Rico, and some territories that allow for acupuncture as primary acupuncturists as primary care providers, and then they're locked out of the system to actually provide that to the patient and for that patient to get reimbursed for that. It's to me, it's mind-boggling. Naturopathy is only allowed in 22 of our jurisdictions, or 23 if you include Puerto Rico of our jurisdictions. That's half the country that doesn't have access to high-level naturopathic medicine care. So yes, we can go to the internet. Oh no, we're lucky. You live in Boulder, Colorado. I live in Santa Cruz, California. We're in bubbles, right? And you have a few of those: Boston, New York, Portland, Oregon, Santa Fe, New Mexico. We have those pockets of bubbles where where natural medicine is more integrated into the community. But John, you go to the Midwest, I'm sorry, it ain't happening. You go deep south, it's not really happening to the same degree as it is in Boulder, Santa Fe, and Santa Cruz. So it is a pay, and as long as people have to pay out of pocket, forget about it. And then one of the worst ones in my mind is with regards to midwifery care. You and I would not consider midwife delivered births as alternative, right? We would consider that the normal way to do birth. But with all due respect, the rest of the country doesn't agree. And for the last 30 years, we have had the highest rates of maternal and infant mortality of any other similarly developed nation. How's
You got,
that happen in
can,
America?
can, can you repeat that?
That the US has the highest rate of both maternal and infant mortality of any other similarly developed nation, meaning nations like the European Union. For example, France has the highest rates of infant mortality in the European Union. The US is twice infant mortality rate of France and per capita. How does
Why?
that happen in the US? Because it's directly correlated with the percentage of C-sections. The WHO says that there should be no more than 10% of birds cesarean section. Our own CDC says it shouldn't be any more than 15%. Our national average for the last 3 decades has been 32% C-section rate, and that correlates with higher infant and maternal mortality. So the answers is and there are studies showing that midwife assisted births have a much lower rate of having to transport for cesarean than conventional births. Now, here's the kicker. 35% of hospitals in the US do not have obstetrics departments in them. So that means a woman has to drive 2 or 3 hours to some other jurisdiction in order to get obstetrics care. And we know that pre-delivery care contributes to healthier births. But if you have to drive 3 hours, you're not going to get that care. And that all contributes to this what I consider to be a horrible, horrible statistic in American and medical care. And we've known about it for 30 years, and they don't know how to change it because they stick only to their paradigm. And one of the things that I did say publicly at the WHO summit was we have to get physicians out of the delivery room and women back in there with midwifery care, with doula care. And then sadly, I was talking with the doula in my community about a month and a half ago, and I'm saying, how do we change these policies? And in her mind, well, I just deliver babies, so I don't really know anything about that policy stuff. But then she said, there just aren't enough midwives to go around because I don't know how much a hospital gets when they deliver a baby. Let's just say it's $15,000. I don't know what it is. A midwife, she's going to do a birth for about $3,200. She can only do that a couple of times a month before getting burnout. She can't make a living. She can't buy a house in Santa Cruz. She can't send her kids to school. She can't make a living with that type of system where you get high reimbursement for conventional care and relatively low reimbursement for alternative care. And again, you and I know that most alternative care is out of pocket. And integrative doctors, many of them only have a cash business or won't take insurance. They'll take credit cards, but won't take insurance because an acupuncturist has to have a secretary to spend 35 minutes doing the paperwork to get reimbursed for $36 from if anybody does carry acupuncture coverage, it's 36 bucks. Well, that's what you just got for your last hour was $36. And you had to pay somebody, $15 an hour just to do the paperwork to do it. So
Come
it
on.
is very much play for pay, unfortunately.
So what you're saying is really so sad because the demographic that can actually afford natural health care are the group that probably needs it the least, right? It's the people who have a lower income, who can't afford, natural care. Maybe they're working one or two or three jobs and they don't have time to even look into it. So they're buying food from the grocery store, which sounds like that's where you go to get groceries, right? Well, not really. That's where you go to get food that is so highly processed that it can actually, or sugar laden or whatever, it's going to really ultimately cause many of these chronic diseases. And then when you mention that the hospitals, very few of the hospitals have obstetrics, I wonder, is that because the hospitals don't want the liability and that's why they're not actually, having maternal care?
I don't. I should know, John. I read the research about that, and in my head, I just forget what the reasons for that were. I'll
Yeah.
send you the paper so you can kind of see it, and that'll fill in the blanks. But it's
Yeah,
also
because
a little worse than that.
I think a lot of people in America think that America's got the best healthcare system in the world. I mean, that's what all the politicians say, and that this is the best healthcare in the world. But what you're saying is exactly the opposite, right?
Oh, but it's not me. That's the sad part about it, John. If anybody really wants to learn about it, you do a search on American healthcare statistics by the Commonwealth Fund. And the Commonwealth Fund is like an international organization that looks at healthcare statistics worldwide. Again, consistently for the last 25 years, in virtually all metrics of wellness. All metrics of wellness. So infant mortality, maternal mortality, longevity, general obesity, childhood obesity, arthritis, cancer, heart disease, in all uh, in all metrics of wellness, we are behind all similarly developed nations. That's the comparator. Other nations that are equally, economically sound as we are, food-wise, food security, we are behind in virtually all metrics of wellness, John. And again, and that's known by WHO, Commonwealth, virtually everybody who studied metrics with regards to wellness knows this. This is not a secret internationally, and it's a sad reality of a system that's based only in disease care, not in wellness care, not in health care.
I think also I mean, on one hand, people who maybe on lower income, they can only go to their medical doctor, although that's a real risk because many times their deductibles $4 to $5 to $6 to $8,000, which is like crazy. But they don't know what alternative care to go to. Do I go to a chiropractor? Do I go to a naturopath? Do I go to acupuncture? People don't know what these things are in general.
Yeah.
And let's kind of, unless there's more bad news that you want to share about the state of the affairs in medicine in America, but let's try to talk about some of the solutions. And please, if there's more bad news, we should get that out of the way first and talk about it. I think people need to hear it. But the way I look at medicine today is there's three buffets. And the first buffet is something there would be systems of medicine that actually help the body heal itself, restore function so the body can heal itself. And those would be things like traditional medicines, like indigenous medicine, Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, really two systems that have been around for thousands of years with lots of science behind them, are really trying to restore balance and help the body heal itself. You don't become dependent on a pill or a powder or a drug. The next buffet, if that doesn't work, you can't get the body to kind of reset, then you do something more like naturopathic medicine, or let's say functional medicine. Basically, functional medicine and Western medicine is naturopathic medicine. And they're using things like natural laxatives, digestive enzymes, bioidentical hormones, things that are going to do the job for you, but in a more natural way. We're going to kind of help your body get it done. But we're going to do it in the most natural way we can. We're not going to give you a drug that's synthetic based that has consequences or side effects. This is where the rubber meets the road, in my opinion, because those naturopathic medicines that are usually extracted of one constituent, like turmeric, for example, you take the curcumin out of the root of turmeric. It's one of 300 constituents, and you concentrate it and you give it as a medicine, which has been shown to help support people with breast cancer and colon cancer and very effective. But it also has consequences. It has side effects because it's not natural. And there's studies showing it can be toxic, it can block stem cell activation. I've written articles about the science behind that. So whenever you take nature and you decide to make it better, that never works well. And so that's what a lot of the naturopathic and functional medicine is doing, although I'm a fan of it. But those are medicines. And medicines, by definition, means you get on it, you get better, and get off. And maybe there's a little consequence, but it's worth, I'm going to get rid of my colon cancer. It's worth having a few less stem cells or a little bit of toxicity in another part of my body. I'm going to take advantage of that to get my symptoms eradicated, get on, get better, get off. And I think those are fine in that department, as long as and I love, herbal extracts come into that, even though they're sterile and they don't have any microbiome in them, which is a big piece of the human puzzle, because you and I know that if we took all the bugs out of us, we would be completely different. You spray all your food with pesticides and insecticides, they're completely different than what they should be for us to inoculate the right bugs in the right gut for the right season, in a sense. And when you take herbal medicines that are extracted and sterilized because they're soaked in alcohol, they have a completely different effect than when you take the whole plant, which has the naturally occurring intelligence, the microbiome, in harmony, in synergy with the actual herbal medicine. That's critically important, and that's part of the Ayurvedic and Chinese approach, definitely something we do at LifeSpa. But then, so I love the naturopathic functional medicine approach, but I think you can become dependent on that pill or a powder because they're not really natural, they're not restoring natural function, and the body becomes dependent on that pill or powder, and the body over time builds a tolerance or a resistance to that. And then we have Western medicine, which will do the job for you at any cost. And of course, all three of those buffets are important, and we need to go. I'm going to eat at the Ayurvedic buffet today, and I'm going to see what I can do. And that didn't work. I'm going to get a little naturopathic support to do the job for me the most natural way I can. And if that doesn't work, I might need to go see a medical doctor and get a drug, which might eradicate the symptom for me, or do a surgery or whatever that might actually help get me back on track. What do you think about that as a model for folks too? Because I think people are confused. I don't even know where to go, what to do. You know what I mean? And Ayurveda, like you said, is in Chinese so much about lifestyle, which is the critical piece of the puzzle. How to shop, what to eat are so fundamental in Ayurvedic medicine. And of course, we both know that Ayurveda is sort of, for whatever reason, not as popular as Chinese medicine. And maybe the one system in medicine in the world that has so much science behind it, that's so time tested. And we have something that's time tested, still around today after thousands of years, and has modern science to back it up. So what we do at LifeSpa is write about all that. We should at least know about that, look at that. But we're all just going, right, I want the super powered turmeric. I want the super powered, beta-cetosterol for my prostate. I want the whatever it is in a super 100 times potency form, because we're in America, right? More is better. Anyway, that's my little pet kind of peeve in terms of what's happening.
No, I'm in complete agreement. So there's a lot to unpack for what you just said.
Please.
What we need is this triage of what I call a triage of integrative medical care or health care. 30 years ago, I attended a traditional Chinese medicine conference. There was a guy named Dr. Shenjia Qi. He was a cardiologist that ran a cardiology department at a hospital in Beijing. He introduced this pyramid. I think I may have shown it to you in Texas, a pyramid of natural health care. You picture the pyramid. At the bottom, you have diet, lifestyle, stress reduction, physical activity, and constitutional herbal remedies. Okay, that's the base of the base of the pyramid. The second rung of the pyramid were Western herbal drugs. So they were drugs that were similar to Western medicine drugs. So for cardiology, diuretics, ACE inhibitors, anti-cholesterol medication, antihypertensives, the whole, whatever the drug du jour is, but herbal, recognizing that the herbs are safer than the conventional. The third rung were the conventional drugs, the more powerful ACE inhibitors, antihypertensives, diuretics, etc. The fourth rung, pacemakers and stents, probably ablation, but the mechanical stuff that you can physically do to the heart. And then the fifth, open heart surgery, heart transplant. John, this was their model of integrative cardiology care. Now, two things. He said that 80% of their cardiology patients could enter the pyramid at the bottom three rungs. So if they had a little bit of high blood pressure going on, or more substantial high blood pressure, you put them on the Western drugs and you drive their blood pressure down while you're integrating the bottom two rungs. You're telling them about diet, lifestyle, stress reduction. They're doing acupuncture. They might get on a constitutional herbal remedy in conjunction with their Western drug. Their blood pressure comes down. Now they can control it with the herbal drugs. You give them a weak diuretic, a weak antihypertensive, a weak this or that, relatively speaking, while they're doing all this lifestyle stuff. And then you triage them down until they no longer need that, and they can be managed with lifestyle and their constitutional herbal remedy. We only think of the use of herbal remedies for the treatment of disease or prevention of disease. Both Ayurveda and Chinese medicine think of the use of herbs for wellness and health and longevity. In Chinese medicine, there's even a saying that to use an herb when you're sick is like digging a well when you're thirsty. It's a little bit too late. You want to use the herbs to keep you well, like something like a Chayavan which uses, or ashwagandha, which is used as rasayanas. These are used to promote wellness and health, not just to, they also treat disease, but they're used to promote wellness. He said 80% could come in the bottom three rungs. And if they get them in those bottom three rungs, very seldom did they progress to needing stents, pacemakers, or open heart surgery. To me, this was a perfect model of both triaged integrative care, where you take a patient where they are in their life and in their stage of health or disease, you give them the most appropriate treatment, whether it's Western, Ayurvedic, Chinese, whatever, all the time, all the while integrating diet, lifestyle, behavioral stuff, which WHO acknowledges is the cure du jour, and it was a wellness-based model. So it's both an integrative model and a wellness-based model. Because you said it, when now you're put on a statin, antihypertensive, antidepressant, it's the rest of your life. They're not trying to get you off statins. They're not trying to get you off of antihypertensives. That's management for life within the Western, medical construct. So to me, that is the model we should be using. Now, one other important thing that you said um, is that people don't know they have a first. Oftentimes, people don't know they have a choice. And the example I make is there's 650,000 hysterectomies performed in the US every year. Half of those are considered unnecessary by second opinion. But that still leaves 325,000 hysterectomies that are performed every year. And what's Western medicine offer? The hysterectomy, ablation therapy, hormonal replacement therapy. There's no wellness-based therapy for improving gynecological health. It's to me that's insane. And I don't know Ayurvedic medicine as well as I know Chinese medicine, but I know Chinese medicine has some of the most clinically effective protocols for all the things for which hysterectomies are performed: PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, or even functional infertility. You don't do a hysterectomy for that, but you have all the artificial insemination because of infertility problems, and 52% of us have problems with conceiving, women. Um, and so women don't know they have a choice to go to Chinese medicine. Give you just a short story. When I first came to Santa Cruz, I worked at a store called the Herb Room. Woman comes in, she's probably, let's say 62, 57, 62, somewhere in that age. She's looking at the shelves. I said, "Can I help you find something?" She says, "No, not really." I said, "You okay?" And she looked like she was crying. She says, "No, not really. Just came from my gynecologist who told me I needed to have a hysterectomy." I said, "Why?" She says, "Oh, I have fibroids." I said, "They want to do a hysterectomy?" "Oh, they want to take everything out: ovaries, uterus, and fallopian tubes." I said, "Why? Just for fibroids?" She said, "Well, I'm past childbearing age, so I might as well take out my ovaries too to prevent ovarian cancer later." And I'm like, "Oh, and you don't want to do that?" She says, "Not really." And I said, "You know what?" I said, "Did they say that it's life threatening?" And she said, "No, but I should do it sometime sooner than later." And I said, "You know what? I don't have all the answers, but neither do they." I said, "Do you want to take a couple of months just to try something? And if it doesn't work, you can always go get the hysterectomy." She says, "Yeah." Long story short, John, I put her on a classical Chinese protocol, had to get out walking every day, 20 minutes, put hot compresses over the area where her fibroids were, and did the anti-estrogen stuff like calcium deglucarate, or get her off of non-organic foods. Most of the pesticides that are on food, you likely know this, they're not designed to kill the bugs. They're estrogen-based pesticides that are designed to cause a high level of reproductive failure in the bug population. But these are xenoestrogens that then act as true estrogen in the body and increase our rates of male and female reproductive cancers. Anyways, Long story short, again, 3 months later, I'm in the store behind the cash register. The woman walks behind the woman comes in the door. She looks at me behind the counter. She walks. I still get tears. She walks behind the counter, gives me a big hug, and says, "I really want to thank you. My fibroids. I just came from my gynecologist. My fibroids are gone." And that's an N of one, but I have an N of about 250 like that. Functional infertility, PCOS, endometriosis, fibroids, um, all women who didn't know they had a choice until one was presented. And the nice part about gynecology, at least not uterine cancer, that's totally different pathology, totally different therapeutics. But functional gynecological imbalances, they don't know they have a way to actually improve the health of the gynecological system. They're only given an option of burning it or cutting it out or saturating it with hormone replacement therapy, which we know increases risk of heart disease and cancer and osteoporosis. So one of my things is to make people aware that they have a choice, and we don't know. Our population doesn't really know that.
Wow. I mean, I kind of wish that this podcast would reach the ears of the people who really need it, in a little bit of a sense where people who probably subscribe to our podcast are a little bit speaking to the choir. Most of these people already know this, but I know that they know people who don't know this. And I invite everybody to share this information because, what Roy is saying is that we all have a choice. There are many, many things that we can do to take care of ourselves besides going to the doctor and getting put on a statin or being put on an anti-heartburn, anti-acid medication, which does so many things that are, maybe they get rid of your heartburn, but they cause so many other problems. There's just so many natural ways that we can go, that there's choices. In one study, there were 74% of the American population have a digestive imbalance, which pretty much they ignore. And in Ayurvedic medicine, I'm not sure about Chinese medicine, 85% of all disease comes from a broken down digestion. So what America does, well, they eat a bunch of processed food, which isn't really food, but they also just bubble wrap their diet. We go, well, I feel bad when I eat beans, so I don't eat them anymore. I don't eat bread anymore. I don't eat wheat anymore. I don't eat rice anymore, or nuts or seeds or legumes or nightshades or oxalates or goitrogens or anything that's a little hard for me to digest. I just take it out. Got to be the food that's bad. We just blame the food, and it's really those symptoms are the canary in the coal mine saying there's something actually wrong with your digestion. And bubble wrapping your diet doesn't fix the problem. It kicks the can down the road. And since your gut immunity is bidirectionally linked to your respiratory immunity, and if one of those is bad, both of those are bad. And if you have any issue with your ability to digest anything, stuff you could eat when you were 18 years old, but now you can't, and you just say, oh, the wheat's got glyphosate, and it's a big problem. Yeah, the wheat's got glyphosate, everything's got glyphosate, but our body has the ability to break down glyphosate if the digestive strength is strong. And our digestive system is directly linked to our ability to detoxify. And we dump, according to the EPA, 70 million tons of toxic chemicals in our atmosphere every year on the food we eat, water we drink, air we breathe. And all that has to be in some way, shape, or form digested and therefore detoxified. And if you're not doing that well, it's all going to get stuck in your fat, either around your belly or your brain, most commonly. And that's going to cause a host of real problems. And this is not crazy scientific, this is logic. If your digestion isn't working well, fix it. Let's not just treat the symptoms with the digestive enzyme and do the digesting for you. Let's troubleshoot your digestive system and fix what went wrong. Fix that so you have the ability to digest and detoxify. And then, because everything that you're talking about, reproductive issues, they're all downstream concerns from stress, diet, lifestyle, toxicity, and your system that protects you against all that is your digestion. Mm-hmm. We know that the gut is where you produce all your neurotransmitters for mood stability and support. And if that's getting clobbered by toxic chemicals, you're not going to make those neurotransmitters. You're not going to detoxify the environmental pollutants. You're not going to deliver the good and get rid of the bad. And eventually, logically, right, we're gonna break down prematurely, and that's happening here more than ever because, like you said, our whole food system, change system, our Medicare system, medical system is driven by capitalism. Who can make the most money? Give you forever drugs, a
Yeah.
prescription that never ends. It's just sort of, when did that happen? I think it was like, was it in the 80s? There was a period of time where we went from getting on a medication to get better, and then all of a sudden medicines became forever chemicals. Do you remember when that happened?
I don't. I have looked at the genesis of the medical thought. For example, in when we came from Europe to the new country, we right away started patenting medicine. And it was that actually created the commercialism in medicine. And you talk about the old patent medicines and stuff like that, and they talk about it as being, the old herbal remedies and stuff like that. But everybody was patenting their drugs. And so this was the first time that with this patenting process that they can control it and they can own it. And therefore now you have a profit motivation. It's not just a health motivation to to develop a drug, for example. Now there's a profit motivation. So that started early on in the earliest development of drugs in this country, which came from predominantly from England. It was the patenting process started in England, and was, exported here. Um, I don't know if there was a demarcation like in the 70s or 80s that changed the mentality, but I can honestly say that commercialism, in just as the WHO representative said, or the advisor said, that commercialism is what rules in this country. Um, and that's a sad reality. And one of the reasons why we don't have better integration of natural therapeutics in the US, is because of that reason. We don't have a national healthcare system. We have a pay for play
Okay.
system, whereas virtually every other country on the face of the earth has a nationalized healthcare system that, in doing that, and in many of those countries, the salary, for example, of physicians or executives is capped, right? It's not a capitalist, they're not capitalistic systems in the true sense of capitalism of America, where everything is about the more we can get, the more toys we can get, the better. So there's less of a negative incentive against natural medicine in other countries than there is in the US because of that. The reason you made mention that acupuncture or Chinese medicine was more popular than Ayurveda, for example, and you said, "Oh, I want, I don't know the reasons why," but one of the reasons why is because the entry point wasn't Chinese medicine. The entry point was acupuncture. So it
Right.
was these crazy Chinese sticking needles into each other in Chinatown, and it didn't really compete with what we're doing. It was a culturally protected thing. That's what actually put the licensure of acupuncture on the map. That once it spilled out into non-Chinatown communities, Western medicine tried to go after it and they couldn't because it was already entrenched in the culture. Herbal medicine is the direct competition to pharmaceutical medicine. Naturopathy medicine, so Chinese medicine, allowed in 52 US jurisdictions, naturopathic medicine in 22 jurisdictions. And again, naturopathic medicine, now you're like a competing doctor, a naturopathic doctor, a naturopathic physician. Now you're direct competition. So figure in 20 or 30 years, we got Chinese medicine in every state of the country, and our own Western naturopathic medicine in 22, right? But that's the reason. It's because of this competition, and that exists less in European Union and far less in Ayurveda in India and in Asia, where Chinese medicine is part of the culture. I was just on this conference with WHO advisors to the traditional medicine directive this morning, and one of them was from India, and they were saying, this is so important to us. We don't understand how the rest of the world doesn't understand the value, isn't aware of the value of things that we've known literally for centuries. And they talk with sadness. It's not anger and it's not bitterness and it's not even frustration. It's just sadness. Is that why don't you people know more about the simple things that you can do to take care of your own health, or the safer things? One other of the sad little secrets of American medicine is that in what year is this? This is 2025. In 2015, 2016, Western drugs overtook cigarettes and alcohol as the primary cause of preventable deaths in the United States, and it's the same in Canada, France, and much of the world. That's worthy of repeating, that that drugs are responsible for more preventable deaths than alcohol and cigarettes. And it's been like that for about 15 years. So the drugs, the medicines that are supposed to be making us better, are actually killing us more than cigarettes and alcohol. That's an appalling statistics. So the conventional medical people will say, yes, but the benefit outweighs the risk, that there's more people getting benefit than are dying. And we know that they're dying, but we accept that. We don't accept that same benefit risk ratio with herbal medicine. A few people die and it's off the market, like what happened with ephedra, which was one of our most safest and effective herbal drugs that we had in our materia medica. There's reports of 6 people potentially dying because they were taking ephedra. If you actually look at it, there's other contributing factors to those deaths. But still, just because of that, I mean, Tylenol is the major cause of liver disease and liver transplants worldwide, and we can eat it like candy. But somebody potentially dies of ephedra and it's removed from the market. Um, so there's no rationale with this thinking.
How do in the EU, like in Germany, for example, Pfizer, which is a huge major German company, right? Drug manufacturing company. I would imagine that they're commercialized, capitalistic as well. How do they, as a German company, um, how does Germany kind of keep the sanity and the commercialism out of it when they've got these billion-dollar companies right there wanting the same amount of profits? They just sell the drugs to America for a big profit and sell them more reasonably in the EU. How does it work?
Well, that is one reason, and that's very well articulated in the medical literature as far as our costs of the same drug compared to the EU or Canada or other countries. So, yeah, so our drugs cost much more, and they make probably most of their profit from the US. But Germany is also an interesting case in that after World War II, um, remember, all the factories were bombed, and because they lost the war, they also, the saying spoils of war. Well, part of the spoils of Germany losing the war were that they had to give up their drug patents. And so during that time, so all their factories and their ability to make drugs were destroyed, the infrastructure, and they lost their patents. So, for example, to aspirin, right? I think that might have happened after World War One. It was the patent was shared by the Allied forces, and so they were forced to go back to herbal medicine. There's actually a word for it that says medicines in times of crisis. And so Germany is both the leading researcher country in the European Union researching medicinal plants more than any other country because of that's one reason why. And two is because they have this cultural knowledge of how to use plants more than much of the rest of the European Union, even though it's still relatively strong in other countries as well. But Germany leads the way as the number one consumer of natural products, of herbal medicines, and one of the primary research countries for herbal medicine research, specifically because of that, both losing the infrastructure and losing their patents.
Hmm. Wow. So, as we kind of wrap this up, I wonder what your take is on what RFK is doing. He seems like, I mean, some people might think he's a little out of control or whatever, but he definitely seems like he's trying to clean up our food supply, definitely trying to bring more awareness to natural medicine. Do you have any hope in that department?
I do. I actually have a lot of hope. I think that his heart is completely in the right place. And my metric of that is look what he's done in the last 20 years. You know, he's taken more action against big pharma, big ag, environmental pollutants and contaminants. He's been in the trenches and he's been in there for 25, 30 years, John. So anybody that says that his heart's not in the right place, I think just haven't really looked at his work. I do think that they're not as straight or sharp on the science part of their ideologies that they put out there. But neither is Western medicine. Western medicine is pathetically devoid of scientific integrity. Um, so I believe his heart's in the right place. I believe the directives that he's trying to implement with regards to childhood obesity, exposure to poison chemicals in our food chain, that to me speaks for itself. I do have a little bit of a concern. Democrats, ultimately he's a Democrat, but Democrats tend to be regulatory heavy, whereas Republicans tend to be regulatory light. Um, he has somehow gotten the message that the herbal supplement world is unregulated, which is completely untrue. It is a highly regulated industry. It's actually more regulated in some ways than the pharmaceutical industry. When you have a pharmaceutical drug, you only have to have 80% of what the label says. Like if it says 100 milligrams, as long as it's 80 milligrams within 20% below or higher, or 10, whatever that percentage is, below or higher, it's acceptable. A supplement has to be 100%. So we're actually in some ways more regulated than a pharmaceutical industry, and we have to follow good manufacturing practices. We're subject to inspections, just like the drug industry, and different than the drug industry. The drug industry can bring toxic stuff to the market. A dietary supplement ingredient, which means a nutritional or an herbal or a protein supplement or whatever kind of supplement, inherently has to be safe. Otherwise, it cannot be brought to the market. And if it does, FDA has the authority to take it off the market. With drugs, you accept the fact when you listen to the commercial on TV. Oh, this causes, heart disease, liver failure, kidney stuff, suicide ideation. I mean, do you really want to take this if you listen to the fine print? So inherently, supplement ingredients, traditional ingredients, have to be safe by law. And any claim that's made on the product has to be truthful and not misleading. So it's a heavily regulated industry, and somehow he's gotten it in his mind that it's not a regulated industry. So that's a little bit of a concern.
Well, people understand the difference between what's called GRAS, or generally recognized as safe, where in America, the rule is that as long as it's generally recognized as safe, you can put it in your house cleaner, you can put it in your detergent, you can put it in your food, you can put it in your herbs. But in Europe, they have to prove, so then someone gets sick or they complain about that generally recognized safe constituent or agent in a certain product. And then America is then forced to study it and find out if it's actually really safe or not. But in the EU, they actually do all the research science before they put it in a food product. Is that how it works?
That's a yes and a no. So the yes part of it is that the EU generally follows what's called a precautionary principle, so that if there's something that suggests there's a potential danger, they err on the side of caution. The no part of it is regarding herbal medicine specifically, or even some nutritional supplements, in that if a ingredient like an herb has been on the market in the European Union for a material time, 25 to 30 years, then there's a presumption of safety that with I take that back, that it's been on the market for 30 years in one of the EU countries, one of the 28 EU countries for 30 years without any signals of potential adversity. I mean, it's St. John's wood. We've been using it forever. Lemon balm, chamomile. Every German mother, grandmother drinks chamomile on a regular basis, and they know that it's relatively safe. Even though there's rare reports of allergenicity associated with chamomile, they take a logical approach that says we've been using this stuff forever. We have science backing it up. We don't have any pharmacovigilance signals suggesting that it's dangerous in the way that we're using it. So it's allowed on the market under the what's called the European Union's Traditional Medicines Directive. So herbal medicine lives in a different space than conventional foods or even some nutritional supplements like a purified L-tryptophan or something like that.
And in the US,
And in the US, herbs can be same thing. So the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act was passed in October 1994. That's the law of the land for dietary supplements, which includes herbal and nutritional supplements. Anything that was on the market prior to October 1994, and again, lacking any information to the contrary that something might cause a health hazard like an ephedra or something that contains pyrrolizidine alkaloids, those are allowed on the market. But if there's a toxic issue, FDA has the ability to pull it off the market. So anything that was on the market prior to 1994, similarly like in Europe, was grandparented in based on a presumption of use, just like your breakfast, right? We got to remember this, put it in context. There are no toxicological studies on bacon, eggs, sausage, ham, toast, butter, coffee, cream, sugar, salt, pepper. There's no toxicological studies on anything that you eat for breakfast. And there's no toxicological or how all of those chemicals are going to interact with each other, right? That's how Western minded researchers think. But that's not been done for breakfast, lunch, dinner, or all the snacks we're eating, let alone the fast foods. It's not been done for the healthy foods. It hasn't been done for the unhealthy foods either. But we accept that they're in the market. Nobody's dying like flies from eating broccoli, even though there's no toxicological studies showing that broccoli's safe. But because it has a history of use, it's presumed to be safe unless otherwise proven not to be safe. That's where most of the nutritional and herbal supplements live as well. They've been on the market for 100 years, 1,000 years, without any signals of adversity. They can probably be on the market for a few more weeks unless we do some animal test that tells us something different.
so what's going on in the EU with turmeric and ashwagandha?
There were, because of reports, so especially ashwagandha, it started with the Dutch report. And this it was actually a veterinary association in the Netherlands that did a safety assessment on ashwagandha, saying that it had hormonal activity and therefore could interfere with childhood development or have some type of negative hormonal activity. There were also reports of liver toxicity of some ashwagandha products. And because of once that report was written, then the rest of the EU started to pick it up. And they said, okay, now we have to put it on our list of herbs that we have to research to see if it's safe. There were some concerns about thyroid toxicity also associated with ashwagandha. And then with turmeric, same similar event in that there were some reports of hepatotoxicity with some curcumin containing, or let's say turmeric containing products. We don't really know what they contain. Did it contain turmeric, turmeric extract, or synthetic curcuminoids, right? We don't know that. Same thing on the ashwagandha. Were the negative reports associated with ashwagandha root, ashwagandha leaf, or the combination of ashwagandha root and leaf, or an extract of the combination? Because we don't do that type of, most people don't do that type of testing, or when you have an adverse effect, you can't always get the product to test. So that's what, and even something as benign as Tulsi, holy basil, showed up on the same list. So now there's a list of about 13 botanicals that virtually every European Union is doing a safety assessment on. Um, we don't know what the results of that will be, but the fact that they would include something like turmeric, ashwagandha, and Tulsi shows that almost nothing is safe from, from some type of, for lack of a better word, a little bit of a witch hunt. Um, Rather than critically reviewing, well, what ashwagandha product caused this? What turmeric product caused this? What is the issue? I think with Tulsi, it's estragol. Same thing with fennel. They find, okay, somebody wrote a paper on the potential hormonal effects of estragol that's in fennel. And so one of the primary uses of fennel is giving it to babies with colic. And so there's a theoretical concern that that will cause potential hormonal imbalances in the baby. But again, you look at Ayurveda, you look at Chinese medicine, and even Western culture, we've been using fennel like that for literally for centuries, and
Yeah.
with no apparent adversity. Um, that it's, again, they take theoretical extrapolations and then they ring the alarmist bell. So that's what's happening in the European Union regarding those.
I think, my take on that, going back to, we talked about those three buffets, and when you actually take a plant or food or an herb and then you alter it, you take away its microbiome, you take away its intelligence, those bacterial endophytes on those plants, which are specifically kind of coded for that bug, for that plant, that supports the intelligence, the longevity, the immunity, and the benefit of that plant, then you take all that away, you have something completely different. And then take it one step further, you take one of 300 constituents in that plant and concentrate it and give it to them. It's again completely different. The body's not recognizing it as something natural anymore. And then you take that and make it synthetic, and it's even further in the world of foreign to the human body. So then you start taking that at high doses because everybody thinks more is better. And then they end up creating a level of liver toxicity. And then you understand that these herbs were historically taken in a seasonal way. Turmeric wasn't harvested for the whole year. Amalaki and all these herbs are harvested at a certain time of the year, and you eat them maybe as a medicine a lot for that season, and then you give the body a break. None of these foods were designed for every day of the year because nature's nutritional cycle is annual, not daily. So you put all that together and you start blaming these herbs. Like we have two grandkids now, and my daughters always ask me, Dad, can I take this? Can I take this? And every single thing I searched for pregnancy, she can't take anything. She can't take slippery elm. She can't take anything. And it's just like that overwhelming level of, which in India, for thousands of years, they've been taking these things. But in America, it's a no, it's a no, it's a no, it's a no. Why? Liability is the real answer. It brings us right back to capitalism. People are scared to death to say anything good about these herbs because if they say it, they're on the hook. And that's the world that I live in, is like, you know what? I want to eat things that are recognizable. When I put it on my plate, I want to recognize it came from it's broccoli, it's lettuce, whether it be meat or eggs. I can look at that plate and I know what I'm eating. There's no chemicals in it. And when I take an herb, I want to know what I'm taking. It's for the most part, I want to take a plant that has this natural microbiome. And according to the FDA, people should know if you're doing it right, when you get the raw material, you got to test it for identity, for bugs, for heavy metals. And then you make a formula out of all your herbs that you want to make a formula. And then you got to test it again. So it's super highly tested. If it says GMP FDA certified on the label, you know it's been through hoops and hoops and hoops and a lot of rigor to make sure what you're getting is actually really pure. And that's what we do at LifeSpa. It's so critically important to know that, because you look at a bottle of pills from Amazon, you have no idea what you're taking and who manufactured it. And that's kind of really, and then one of these gets kind of called out for being not having exactly what it said it had in it. And then people start questioning the integrity of the entire industry. And there are people, you and I both know, that are doing it really well with really high standards, and they're really, really safe, particularly when you live in that world of, plants that have been used for thousands of years without any problem, in their whole form of their natural microbiome. And then it's just like inoculating your gut with the diversity of our gut that we so desperately need. Our lack of diversity, according to a Stanford study, is now called an extinction event, because we have so few bugs in our gut. Why? We take all this sterile stuff. We take sterile herbs, we take sterile vitamins, we take sterile foods, everything's sterile. It's just, and that's kind of where I think these traditional systems of medicine, they say, hey, come on, let's get some logic back to this. Go to your local farmer's market, eat food that you recognize, eat foods that have their natural microbiome, and maybe in season the best that you can. Is giant steps in the direction of solving, the things that you brought up, all these problems that we have in our culture, because the medical system is being dictated by millions and billions and billions of dollars, which, is out of control.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hallelujah. But
All
I
right,
would
my
offer
friend.
one piece of feedback, John.
Yeah.
When I'm in total philosophical alignment with everything you said. What we have to be careful about is drawing conclusions and correlations regarding the reasons why herbal toxicity happens. Because when you actually do a critical review of the case report, in most cases, there's not enough information to say whether or not it was actually caused by the herb itself. The person could have been on taking Tylenol at the same time. We had a case of that where a woman had she drank chaparral tea, right? And 3 weeks later needed a liver transplant. Well,
Oh,
what wasn't written in the case report was that she had consumed almost a fifth of hard alcohol every day for the preceding year and was taking Tylenol for quote unquote severe abdominal pain. But of course, it was the chaparral that caused it, right? So
yeah.
we also have to be critical of how we're correlating whether or not something like an ashwagandha or a turmeric really is dangerous,
Right.
Um, all those arguments do make sense, but you have to critically review whether or not there was actually enough information to determine causation and not just FDA. There was one report in FDA's database of an ephedra related death. And you know what the death was? The guy was going 55 miles an hour down a one-way street in a 35-mile-an-hour zone. His blood alcohol was above the legal limit, and he crashed into a pole and died. And they found a bottle of ephedra in his back seat.
Really?
And that was recorded as an ephedra-related death. They didn't say there was ephedra in his blood system. They just found the bottle, and that's listed as an ephedra-related death. And this is in FDA's MedWatch reporting. So we have to be careful we have to be critical thinkers when we hear these reports and not just jump to the conclusion that, oh, maybe it was synthetic curcumin. Yeah, maybe it was. but maybe it wasn't even the turmeric at all. Maybe it was leaf and root ashwagandha extract. Well, maybe it wasn't. So we just have to be careful about that. And I think this goes to what we all have to do. We all have to be critical thinkers in our own life, especially in the natural health world. We're our own healer first. And we have to use our common sense. We have to use our critical thinking skills. We have to search the best information that we can to make the most informed decisions that we can make. In the world of opportunities that we have, that ranges all the way from your Ayurvedic and Chinese medicine buffet to the Western drug buffet to the surgical buffet, right? We should have access to all of this, but each of those choices should be informed. And unfortunately, that's on us. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's on us. But we've been conditioned to go to a doctor and the doctor says, here, you have this, take this pill, see you tomorrow, or see you next week, or see you next year for your next 6-minute, visit, average 6-minute visit. So we have to recondition ourselves to become our own healers and take responsibility first.
Roy Upton, I love you. I think you're doing such great work. You've been doing such great work for so many years. And I'm just so in awe of the work that you do. I mean, you really have just dug deep into the science. He's written these brilliant monographs with these herbal, little magazines almost, where you can really take a deep dive into every single herb, the good, the bad, the ugly, the research, the science. The work that you've done has been so needed, and I want to thank you so much for coming and for all the work that you're doing and continue to do. I don't think you have 10 years left. Let's put that out there a lot longer.
You think I only have 5?
No, I think you have like 20 or 30. That's what I'm saying. I think you were the one that really said we only have 10 good years left. I'm going, come on, I'm not going down that road. I'm not going to say we're going to live to 180 like some of the biohackers say they're going to live. I mean, that's a little stretchy, but I think we have enough time left to hopefully see the return on the investment, that this healthcare system really shifts to something that's for the people as opposed to for the big companies. Roy, how can people get a hold of you if they want to follow you? What's the best way for them to do that?
I'm on LinkedIn. You could just search Roy Upton on LinkedIn, or our webpage for the American Herbal Pharmacopoeia, which is www.herbal-ahp.org. So if you go herbal-ahp.org, you'll find me.
Okay.
I'm very easy to find. Roy Upton, herbalist. I'm very easy to find.
Yeah, you could just Google him or chat GPT him, or whatever you do these days.
You'll find. I'm easy to find.
All right, my friend. Well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate the work you're doing. We'll stay in touch, okay?
You too, John. Thank you.
You bet.
Take care.
Take care. Hi, everybody. I just want to take a minute and tell you what we do here at LifeSpa.com. I've been in practice now for 40 years, 38 of them have been practicing Ayurvedic medicine full-time. For the last 20 years, I've been writing articles and doing videos on the ancient medical wisdom of Ayurveda with the modern science. If something's been around for 1,000 years, still practiced today, and you have modern science to prove it, boy, I really feel like that's something we should all be taking a look at. And that's what we do at LifeSpa.com. And all that information is for free. So just go to LifeSpa.com and search in your health topic, and you'll get the information, the article that you need, hopefully that will help you. While you're there, check out our Ayurvedic store. You can get there through LifeSpa.com or go to store.lifespa.com. And there we have all of our organic Ayurvedic herbs, organic skincare line, more books, tapes, knowledge that we give you is all there at our store. All of our cleansing kits are there in our store. All of our herbs are whole herbs with the natural occurring microbiome, the way it came out of the soil. And that's critically important, because if I took the bugs out of you, you'd be completely different. We take the bugs away from a plant, like sterilizing, making an extract, or spraying your food with pesticides, you lose significant benefit of that plant. And that's why we use the whole plant with the natural occurring microbiome. So check us out, learn more about what we're doing here at LifeSpa.com, and we'll see you again.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.